My ex took me to court for emotional damages after she cheated on me. The gavel crashed against the polished oak bench so hard the vibration traveled up my spine. Case number 22-378, Judge Miriam Ortega intoned, her no-nonsense baritone filling Department 47 of the Superior Court of California. Parker versus Miller. Claim for emotional damages in the amount of $150,000. My full legal name, Ethan Jacob Miller, felt suddenly alien, like someone had pinned a price tag to it. Across the aisle, my ex-girlfriend Alyssa Parker sat on the witness stand in a dove-gray skirt suit, mascara running in high-definition rivulets, while she clutched a packet of tissues as though the paper itself might keep her from crumbling. A flash drive, silver, unremarkable, rested on the evidence cart. Her pièce de résistance, an audio recording she swore proved I'd wrecked her mental health. 5 months ago, she'd begged me to forgive her affair. Now she wanted my life savings. The bailiff swore me in, and the whole room waited for the train wreck story none of them had bought tickets to witness. Judge Ortega's words droned into the background as my memory slammed me backward, to the day a bright red envelope arrived in my mailbox. 6 weeks earlier, a manila envelope stamped with scarlet lettering, legal notice, service of process, lay curled like a dead snake on my welcome mat. Loki, the tan mutt Alyssa and I rescued together, sniffed it, decided it wasn't edible, and trotted off. Inside, I unfolded a 19-page civil complaint. It alleged that I, through manipulative gaslighting, coercive isolation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, had caused Alyssa Parker irreversible psychological trauma totaling $150,000. I reread the lines 3 times, certain some cosmic intern had mixed up files. The day Alyssa cheated on me felt so fresh, I still tasted bile whenever I thought about it. Yet here she was painting herself as the casualty of a monster. My hands shook badly enough that the pages rattled like leaves in a storm when I phoned my best friend Marcus. Bro, she cheated and then sued you? That's like robbing a bank, shooting yourself in the foot and blaming the cashier. Marcus offered beer, couch space, and unhealthy amounts of sarcasm. I accepted all 3. But shock morphed into slow-boil rage only after I scrolled through Alyssa's Instagram that night. She'd posted a close-up selfie, eyes red, hand pressed to her chest, and the caption read, "Healing isn't linear. Thank you to everyone who's supporting my journey beyond abuse." A link in her bio redirected to a GoFundMe titled, "Therapy After Narcissistic Trauma." Donations topped $7,000. Comments overflowed with #SurvivorStrong and #BelieveWomen. I knew those hashtags mattered to so many real victims. The fact that Alyssa weaponized them felt like punching holes in a life raft. I typed a furious rebuttal, deleted it, pasted a groove into Marcus's hardwood, then finally messaged an acquaintance from college who'd gone into law. Connor Lewis. Connor responded at 1:24 a.m. "Send me the complaint. Let's talk tomorrow. First coffee on me." He'd once defended a classmate's guinea pig in a mock trial, and won via rhetorical napalm. If anyone could steer me through this minefield, it was him. Before Connor's meeting, though, the memory of how we got here surfaced uninvited. 2 years earlier, I met Alyssa volunteering at the Chicago Avenue Animal Shelter. I was scooping litter boxes when a beagle puppy bolted, ears flapping like busted helicopter blades, straight toward the door. Alyssa intercepted him, sliding on her knees through disinfectant, laughing as the pup ruined her leggings with muddy paws. She looked up and flashed a grin so bright, I temporarily forgot I was holding a trash bag of cat poop. We bonded over rescue animals, indie playlists, and deep dish pizza arguments. She was studying social media marketing and curated her life with algorithmic precision. My Instagram was a graveyard of blurry fishing photos. She joked that dating me would boost my personal brand. I joked that Post-its boosted productivity, and she taped one on my mirror. "Drink water. Call your mom." By month 5, we'd split rent on a 2-bedroom apartment with exposed brick and a rent that made my software tester salary sigh. Alyssa live-streamed our IKEA furniture builds. Strangers shipped us potholders from her Amazon wishlist. It felt annoyingly perfect, until the first hairline crack. At a mutual friend's game night, she disappeared to take a call and returned 40 minutes later smelling like peppermint gum and explaining that her cousin needed dating advice. Another time, I woke at 3 a.m. to giggles in the living room. She insisted she'd fallen asleep scrolling TikTok, yet her phone brightness was maxed. I wrote it off as paranoia. Love, it turns out, is great at forging blinders. The blinders shattered 6 months later on what I later labeled Passport Day. We were set to drive west to meet my parents at their lake house for Memorial Day. At 9:12 a.m., I realized my passport, needed for a planned impromptu Canada detour, was still in the desk drawer. Alyssa, craving an iced caramel macchiato, asked me to drop her at Bean and Brews on Navy Street. She kissed my cheek, promised to grab croissants, and sashayed out. 10 minutes later, I unlocked our apartment to the kind of silence that buzzes. A man's Adidas duffel sat by the couch. A lump formed in my stomach, but denial pushed me forward. From the bedroom came breathy laughter. Bryce, her friend from yoga, a walking six-pack with motivational speaker energy, lay entangled with Alyssa in the middle of our gray duvet. The sight froze me. The sound, a throaty giggle I'd thought was private, shattered me. Bryce scrambled for pants. Alyssa's mouth opened, closed, morphed into a plea. Ethan, I swear it's not what it looks like. We both stared at the used condom knotted on the nightstand like a grim punchline. I can't recall the whole argument. I remember throwing Bryce's duffel into the hallway, Loki barking hysterically, and neighbors' doors cracking open like judgmental eyes. Alyssa moved out that night, hauling 2 suitcases and our bedroom lamp. She left Loki's favorite squeaky squirrel because, she mumbled, "It smells like you." Grief is strange. Some mornings I woke convinced the breakup was a fever dream. Other mornings I replayed the bedroom scene until my chest hurt. 48 hours after the split, I received an email titled Preservation of Evidence. Alyssa's attorney, someone named Bryce Stein, no relation to Yoga Bryce but equally obnoxious, demanded I retain all texts, emails, and social media posts from our relationship. I laughed so hard I cried, then cried so hard I laughed again. Connor's office sat above a donut shop, sugar scent mingling with printer toner. He scanned the complaint, eyebrows inching north. Good news. Her claim's a Jenga tower. Bad news. If a jury likes her better than you, Jenga towers sometimes stay standing. He explained California's broad definition of emotional distress. The jury pool's sympathy for sob stories, and the sick reality that settlement offers sometimes made financial sense even when you were innocent. I told him settlement was off the table. He grinned. Good, let's topple the tower. Stage 1 was evidence triage. I spent weekends sifting 4 years of messages, categorizing emojis like forensic glitter. Connor subpoenaed Alyssa's therapist records. We filed a motion to compel discovery of her social media activity. Bryce objected, citing patient privacy and irrelevance. Judge Ortega, thank every deity, agreed with us. While legal gears ground, Alyssa orchestrated a public narrative. Screenshots of her tear-streaked GoFundMe peppered Facebook groups. One morning, my manager asked if everything was okay at home because an abuse survivor coalition had emailed HR claiming I was dangerous. My cheeks burned, but I produced the complaint and confession of her infidelity. Corporate lawyers took over. HR apologized. Therapy saved me from imploding. Dr. Elaine Turner, 60-something and serenely blunt, taught me grounding exercises. Name 5 blue objects, she'd instruct whenever my pulse spiked discussing court day. Sometimes the only blue thing I could name was despair. Sleep during those weeks before trial came in staccato bursts. I'd jerk awake at 2:17 a.m., convinced a process server was at the door with another stack of allegations. Some nights Bryce starred in the dream, face stretched like funhouse glass, accusing me of crimes I couldn't decipher, while Alyssa sat behind him rehearsing tears in a handheld mirror. Dr. Turner had me keep a dream journal. Writing them down robbed them of teeth. Still, I bought heavier curtains, a white noise machine, and the biggest lock Home Depot sold. One afternoon, I spent 4 obsessive hours graphing Alyssa's GoFundMe donation spikes against her most viral Instagram reels. The correlation coefficient hit 0.86, strong enough to satisfy my inner data geek and maybe a jury. Connor chuckled when I showed him the scatter plot. "You're turning heartbreak into math," he said. "That's either genius or clinical, maybe both." The graph ultimately entered evidence as Exhibit 19. Jurors love pictures. Deposition day arrived swaddled in July humidity. Alyssa wore funeral black, lips quivering fabulously. She described me waking her at midnight to demand phone passwords, screaming that she was worthless, forbidding her from seeing friends. On the date, she cited I was working a double shift. Time clock logs and Slack messages proved it. Connor waited until she finished painting me as a sociopath, then slid evidence across the table. My shift schedule, a video of me presenting at 11:47 p.m. for clients in Sydney, and a statement from my boss. Alyssa's face cracked like a porcelain vase hit with a hammer. Mid-deposition break, the receptionist handed Connor an envelope dropped by a courier. Inside, a thumb drive and a note reading. "Thought you'd need this. Good luck." The drive contained a 30-second clip from 3 years earlier. Alyssa in a dorm bathroom rehearsing gulps and tears, then flashing the camera a grin. She'd sent it to her roommate with the message, Oscar-worthy, the roommate's name. Josh Harkins, also the anonymous Instagram messenger. Smoking gun achieved. Trial began on an uncharacteristically stormy Monday, thunder growling like distant artillery over Los Angeles. Jury selection took 2 days. Bryce struck anyone who worked in mental health or animal rescue. Apparently, empathy skewed pro-Ethan. Connor struck 2 jurors who followed Alyssa on Instagram. Opening statements framed dueling universes. Bryce painted Alyssa as a compassionate advocate for rescue animals whose sunny spirit was systematically extinguished by my cruelty. Connor countered with facts. Alyssa's affair, GoFundMe profiteering, and a caution against weaponizing legitimate social justice language. I watched jurors' faces. One elderly woman frowned when Bryce claimed I'd imprisoned Alyssa by stealing her car keys. The next photo slide showed her on a Vegas road trip with friends that same weekend. Day one's central exhibit was the flash drive. Alyssa claimed it held a voice memo of me calling her a useless idiot. The recording played. A garbled male voice indeed spat those words. But the metadata, Connor pointed out, showed it was recorded 6 weeks after Alyssa moved out, in a location pinging to her new apartment. Alyssa insisted I'd broken in. My stomach lurched until Connor produced building logs proving my key fob hadn't accessed that property ever. Judge Ortega stared down at Alyssa. Miss Parker, perjury is a felony. Alyssa wilted. Day 2 starred Dr. Candace Shaw, Alyssa's so-called therapist. Under cross, Dr. Shaw admitted she never held a license. She was a life coach trauma empath whose sessions occurred via Zoom group calls where she dispensed collective healing. She'd never met Alyssa individually, nor written clinical notes. Connor asked if she prescribed treatment. Affirmations and essential oils, she said. Jury scribbles intensified. We recessed for lunch. Outside, media vans ringed the courthouse. Stranger orbits of the internet latched onto the case. MRAs calling me a hero, feminist bloggers calling Alyssa a fraud, legal TikTokers dissecting courtroom sketches. I felt both exposed and unreal, like a hologram trapped inside a soap opera. Day 3 brought handwriting expert Martin Velasquez. He testified the journal confession pages Alyssa submitted were printed in a handwriting font, then traced over with gel ink. The gel contained methyl violet dye, manufactured only in batches, postdating my alleged confession by 2 weeks. Bryce objected to the word forgery. Judge Ortega allowed fabrication. I caught a juror's mouth curl in disgust. Then Connor filed our counterclaim mid-trial. Defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, $50,000. Bryce called it vindictive retaliation, but Judge Ortega allowed it to proceed concurrently. Alyssa burst into tears loud enough that the bailiff offered earplugs to the jury. Day 4, finale day. Connor called Priya Shah, lead forensic specialist for Biteback Analytics. Priya projected a screen grab. Alyssa's iCloud backup retrieved 2 months prior. Video played. Alyssa, champagne flute in hand, toasting Bryce in a kitchen. Her words rang. Worst case, we scare him into settling. Best case, we get paid and move to Scottsdale. Bryce lunged for the projector remote. The bailiff intervened. Gasps erupted. One juror muttered, "Wow!" Alyssa cried, "It was a joke!" Judge Ortega's glare answered. Closing arguments felt like sweep-up after a tornado. Bryce claimed Alyssa was coerced by others into fabrications, that trauma survivors act irrationally. Connor methodically recapped each lie. Falsified journal, doctored audio, bogus therapy, perjurious testimony. He finished with, "Ladies and gentlemen, justice is not a crowdfunding campaign. Truth doesn't need glitter to shine." The jury deliberated 92 minutes. Verdict. Plaintiff's claim dismissed with prejudice. Sanctions of $25,000 levied against Alyssa for bad faith litigation. Counterclaim found in my favor, damages to be determined at subsequent hearing. Alyssa wailed. Bryce requested to withdraw as counsel effective immediately. I felt gravity return to my body. For months I'd lived in fight or flight. Suddenly my limbs weighed normal human amounts again. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, mics thrust like spears. I issued one sentence. I hope this reminds people that false accusations hurt real survivors. The next day I wired the sanction money, once collected, to the California Innocence Project's new fund assisting victims exonerated of false accusations. Social media exploded. Some branded me a martyr. Others claimed I weaponized philanthropy for clout. I avoided both camps, walking low-key along the river path where sycamores dripped golden light into the water. For the first time since Passport Day, my pulse aligned with birdsong rather than panic. Within weeks, the internet's roar dimmed. Court scheduling set our damages hearing 6 months out. Connor predicted Alyssa would file bankruptcy. I returned to my apartment, minus memories we'd curated, and repainted the bedroom aquamarine because Dr. Turner said fresh color disrupts trauma loops. Loki approved, thumping his tail like a paint stirrer. One late September evening, under fairy lights on Marcus's patio, I drafted a long Reddit post by phone glow. I detailed the saga, sparing legal minutiae but bearing emotion. Heartbreak, anger, therapy, vindication. I asked readers if I was the asshole for donating potential damages instead of treating myself after being dragged through hell. Responses poured in. Not the asshole, not the asshole. Then one that read, take some of the money and buy yourself new memories. Charity can wait. I stared at the comment a long time, realizing I finally had options instead of obligations. A week later, I booked a solo trip to Banff, the Canadian stop we never made. On a chilly dawn at Moraine Lake, I watched sunlight paint glaciers pink. I felt small, and in that smallness free. I composed a final edit to my Reddit post. Update. Life's messy, but it's mine again. If you're ignoring red flags because love feels easier than leaving, please remember. Boundaries are the opposite of cruelty. They're self-respect. When the plane touched down in Chicago, voicemail icons stacked like bricks. The first was from Connor. Damages hearing rescheduled. Bryce disbarment hearing pending. The second was from Mom. She finally forgave me for missing Memorial Day. The third was from an unknown number. Alyssa, voice hoarse, no words. Just 30 seconds of breathing before soft sobs cut off. I deleted it. Closure isn't letting someone apologize. It's deciding you don't need the apology. Now, months later, I'm typing this from my own living room, Loki curled against my leg, Netflix autoplay stuck on a generic romantic comedy. The irony isn't lost on me. Love stories sell hope, but they skip the part where hope can bankrupt you. Financially, emotionally, spiritually, if you hand it to the wrong bidder. My ending isn't a sunrise wedding or a slow-motion reunion at the airport. My ending is a quiet night, a rescue dog who trusts me, and a court transcript that finally, firmly, puts truth on record. I wish I could say everything ended neatly there, but real life keeps writing sequels without permission. 3 weeks after the verdict, Bryce, who'd pivoted from personal injury to influencer law, filed a motion to reconsider based on new psychological insight. Judge Ortega denied it in a single-sentence order that basically translated to, nice try. Reddit threads speculated he'd tanked his own career for a woman he secretly loved. TMZ ran an article titled, Attorney's Broken Heart Costs Him Bar Card? I refused interviews, learning I could choose silence without ceding my narrative. I avoided the circus by burying myself in work. My startup assigned me to a security project codenamed Gargoyle that required 90-hour sprints. The irony of building phishing detection software while being litigation fished in real life was not lost on me. At 2 a.m. code reviews, I'd catch myself scrolling court transcripts, highlighting Alyssa's contradictions. The therapist called it rumination. I called it research for closure, but closure doesn't come signed by a clerk. It's a series of micro-decisions. Dr. Turner introduced EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which involved tracking her finger while recalling traumatic images. At first, I felt ridiculous, like a cat chasing a laser pointer of pain. Yet after 4 sessions, the acid behind my sternum ebbed. Alyssa's face in court no longer jackhammered my pulse. Instead, I saw a woman so lost in her own narrative, she could no longer separate truth from tactic. Thanksgiving arrived. Mom set an extra place anyway, a sweet ritual left over from when my grandfather served overseas. Halfway through grace, she squeezed my hand and whispered, healing looks good on you. Dad cracked a joke about my dating background check requirements. The whole table laughed, even me. December's damages hearing was swift. Alyssa no-showed, claiming illness. Judge Ortega awarded me $42,000 for defamation plus fees. Connor texted confetti emojis. I called the Innocence Project again. This time I earmarked $10,000 for digital forensic scholarships. Priya's field needed more diversity, then paid off Marcus's couch, which Loki had artistically redesigned with claw marks. The remaining sum went into a high-yield emergency fund labeled Peace of Mind. One icy night, Marcus and I hit a dive bar to toast the final verdict. Over cheap bourbon, he asked, any chance you'll date again without demanding a notarized honesty certificate? I laughed, then surprised myself by answering, maybe. But next time I'm keeping my passport in my glove box, just in case. It felt good to joke without bitterness corroding the punchline. That winter, I joined a community basketball league. 12 men and women in mismatched jerseys, none of whom cared about my broken public image. During breaks, we complained about knee pain and swapped book recommendations. One teammate, Lexi, worked as a veterinary tech. Loki adored her banana-flavored treats. We started grabbing coffee after practice. She never once asked about Alyssa, and I realized that my story, once the solar system around which every thought orbited, could be just a meteor in someone else's sky. In early spring, Lexi invited me to volunteer at a mobile spay and neuter clinic. As I wrangled a 30-pound pit bull mix, I had a visceral flashback to the day Alyssa and I first met. For a heartbeat, nostalgia sprayed salt on half-healed wounds. But then, Lexi high-fived me, declaring the dog officially microchipped and ready for adoption, and the flash evaporated like breath on cold glass. The past wasn't gone, but it wasn't driving. April 30th marked 11 months since Passport Day. I commemorated by printing out the dismissed complaint, shredding it, and feeding the confetti into the community garden compost. Marcus filmed the ritual for posterity. Loki tried to eat the paper shreds. Some habits die hard. In May, the State Bar announced Bryce Stein's suspension for multiple ethical breaches, including presentation of knowingly false evidence. Headlines devoured him for 48 hours, then spit him out for juicier news. I felt no triumph, just a quiet confirmation that consequences still exist, even in a post-truth era. July brought one final epilogue. A fat white envelope arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside lay a check for $1 and a note. "This is all I can give. I never meant to hurt you." Connor said, cashing it could imply settlement. I tacked it to my fridge as a reminder that some debts cost too much to collect. Which brings me here, typing with Loki's head warm on my foot. Netflix droning a rom-com where two impossibly symmetrical people fall in tidy love. My life is asymmetrical as hell, but it's real. The weirdest thing about surviving a reputational near-death is discovering how ordinary the aftermath feels. You still have to floss, reply to work emails, buy milk before it expires. If you've read this far hoping for a fairy tale coda, I owe you honesty. The gavel drop wasn't magic. Nightmares still visit. Trust issues still flare. And sometimes a stranger's suspicious glance still prickles like sunburn. Yet every morning I wake up, stretch, and realize that the space between trigger and reaction has grown wider. Room enough to breathe, to choose. So, internet stranger, if you find yourself loving someone who scrawls over your boundaries with permanent marker, remember this. Love without limits isn't romance. It's self-harm disguised as devotion. Walk away before a jury has to walk in. I hit post, watch the character counter beep green at exactly the limit, and close the laptop. Loki sneezed. Life's applause. Outside, city lights blinked Morse code, only pigeons understood. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, toasted the ceiling, and let the silence wash over me. For the first time in a year, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. A final footnote for the legally curious. California's tort code now requires judges to consider social media monetization when assessing emotional distress claims, a precedent partially inspired by our circus. Connor sent me the opinion with a sticky note. "Congrats, you're a citation." It felt absurd, my private heartbreak stapled into public jurisprudence. Yet if that footnote saves even one person from being leveraged by likes and sob filters, the pain purchases purpose. And with that, I shut chapter and walked into the next, free at last.